Okay, thank you for coming tonight. My name is Mark Tolo. I'm the Vice Chair of the Coalition for Peace Action, which used to be right across the street here, but now we're across the way in the Methodist Church. That's where the office has moved to. Unfortunately, Bob Moore, unfortunately for us, he's on vacation, so he won't be here. And also Irene Goldman, who is our board chair. That's the steering committee is the board that we have for the coalition. She also is in Massachusetts, so the honor falls to me to welcome all of you to the commemoration. I should say the what's the number here? 79. Not 79, is it?
It's the 45th.
45. Wow. Okay, I got the number wrong. Anyway, huge number. We've been doing this every year here in Princeton with the coalition. It's part of our core value here. And speaking of the core, we have some music for you tonight to just start things out. And that is from the Solidarity Singers. And Bennet Zurofsky is the leader here. And you're going to hear some fine music. And then we're going to do a moment of silence when we're done.
Good evening. I see some of you may have picked up song sheets. We're going to start with Down by the Riverside, but we'll all know anyway without a song sheet. So please sing with us. Gonna lay down my sword down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Gonna lay down the guns and bombs. Gonna lay down the guns and bombs. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Gonna lay down the guns and bombs. Down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Gonna hold hands around the world. Gonna hold hands around the world. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by gonna hold hands around the world down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Gonna bring all the soldiers back. Gonna bring all the soldiers back. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Gonna bring all the soldiers back. Down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Gonna bury those atom bombs. Gonna bury those atom bombs. But not by the riverside. But not by the riverside. Gonna bury those atom bombs. gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Last verse, gonna build a world of peace. Gonna build a world of peace. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Gonna build a world of peace. Down by the riverside. War no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Come on. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. We're going to do, soon and very soon, we're just going to sing about 3 verses. We want to be on the okay? So this is on the second page. I'm going to call them out. We're going to do the first verse, the second verse, and the last verse. Okay? The other songs you can do in the first verse, the second verse, and the last verse, or else we'll go over time. Soon and very soon, we are going to change the world. Soon and very soon, we are going to change the world. Soon and very soon, we are going to change the world. It'll last forever and ever. Going to change the world. Soon and very soon, atomic weapons will be gone. Soon and very soon, atomic weapons will be gone. Soon and very soon, atomic weapons will be gone. Soon and very soon, atomic weapons will be gone. They'll be gone forever and ever. We're going to change the world. Soon and very soon, peace and justice shall prevail. Soon and very soon, peace and justice shall prevail. Soon and very soon, peace and justice shall prevail. Soon and very soon, peace and justice shall prevail. It'll last forever and ever. Going to change the world. Peace and justice forever. Going to change the world.
Thank you, Solidarity Singers. They'll be back with us a little bit later in the program. Thank you very much. The reason we had to speed this up a little bit is that we're trying to get ready to have a moment of silence at precisely 7:15. The reason for that is that when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, that was precisely 8:15 at the time in Japan, 8:15 in the morning. If you work out the math, that's 17 p.m. the night before here. So at 7:15, which is just about now, I'm going to ask that we all just stop everything and have a moment of silence. Okay, let's begin. This is commemoration for the people of Hiroshima and also of Nagasaki.
Don't be scared. That's all he knows, okay? Yes.
Thank you very much. Just so you know, this moment of silence is being shared with people right now in Hiroshima who are having a similar gathering, but it's morning time there. And with other people, I'm not just sure how many places around the world that are still commemorating that time on April 6th there, April 5th here for us. August, I'm sorry. and so we're part of something that is much bigger than just a collection of people right here. Okay, but speaking of the collection of people right here and of the Coalition for Peace Action, I wanted to go on to introduce our first speaker tonight, who we're very, very honored to have. And this is Jeff Laurenti, and he's here with us. But wait, I want to give a little bit of rundown on some of the amazing things that he has been doing with his life. I'm going to start a little bit in the middle. He has been most recently Executive Director of Policy Studies at the United Nations Association of the United States, and Director of Foreign Policy Programs at the Century Foundation. Earlier, he directed international task forces on peacemaking in Afghanistan, which I commemorate with my Peace Corps cap here, because I was in Afghanistan in the 1970s myself. But the peacemaking was a much bigger job than the one I had, I can assure you. And also at UNESCO, and the United Nations Association studies with grassroots components on global environmental policy, narcotics, and arms control. Before he got involved in these things, though, he had I think it must have been a rather interesting job working for the New Jersey State Senate as one of their staffers, one of their important staffers. And this was about the time in the early 1980s when Bob Moore and a lot of people from Princeton and a lot of people from all over the country were working on the idea of a nuclear freeze. And their way of doing this was to get it put on the ballot in as many places as they could. And in order to do that in New Jersey, it took a vote of the state legislature. Well, Bob worked on that very hard, and one of the people he worked with was a very sympathetic and hardworking patriot, I guess you could say, in the state Senate, Jeff Laurenti at the time. And because of the hard work of people like you and of people like Jeff, the resolution, I guess it was passed in the state of New Jersey. So that goes way back to the beginning of our organization here. And from that time until now, Jeff has been doing 1,000 other things, but he's also checking in with us to make sure everything's doing well here in the Coalition for Peace Action. I happen to be on the committee, the Advocacy Committee for the Coalition, and Jeff drops by, and when he speaks, people listen because they know they're going to get well-informed, perceptive, and information that they can deal with, that they can use as a program for going forward. That is one of the reasons he was invited here. He's a long-term member, but there is another reason, which we've sort of kept under wraps until now, but I think it can be revealed. I spoke of Irene Goldman, our chair. After 20 years serving as chair, she has decided to retire. And so in September, she will be turning over the chair to Jeff Laurenti as our new chair for the Coalition for Peace Action in this part of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So with that in mind, we have asked Jeff to come and speak to us and to give us kind of a broad background of where we have been And maybe later on we'll get a little bit more of where we're going.
Thank you very much, Mark. I recognize that leading this august and very purposeful organization in the wake of Irene Goldman's spectacular commitment is going to be a tough act to follow, but I will do the best I can. Let me also welcome you, as Mark had done, to this hour of remembrance. It marks an anniversary that humankind must never forget, of events it must never repeat. For this is the anniversary of humankind's discovery that it had unlocked the toolkit of our own annihilation. Of course, as Mark said, at this very hour there is unfolding a commemoration of that discovery right where annihilation was first and earth-shatteringly experienced. Hiroshima today, Nagasaki 3 days hence. We join many others around the world who commemorate today this fearsome discovery. But our own commemoration here in Princeton has unique resonance. Last year's critically acclaimed, and perhaps more surprisingly, commercially successful film, Oppenheimer, brought home to its audiences the deep connections between Princeton and the brilliant scientific minds who broke the code to the explosive potential of the atom. Albert Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer are only the most famous. The physicists who led the way in developing the technology of nuclear weapons were also among the first to recognize the horrific moral consequences of their discovery, among the first to want to rein it in. But once the men of science turned over the keys to the men of power, control over their discovery was out of their hands. Power has its own dynamic, the dynamic of strength, and too often of strength that disparages moral restraints as weakness, as hand-wringing, as immobilizing. Recall the Oppenheimer film's portrayal of the deepening conflict between its title character and General Leslie Groves. Recall President Truman's irritation with Oppenheimer's burden of guilt about the lives lost to the applied science of the Manhattan Project. After I married Yuki Moore of Princeton, just a second. I discovered new threads of connectivity to these long ago events. Her father, James Moore of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood here, was a postman delivering mail on Princeton's prized #1 route on the west side of the borough, including the home of the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, Dr. Oppenheimer. Before setting out on his delivery rounds each day, Brud Moore was required to enter into a log all the mail he was to deliver to Oppenheimer, from whom and from where every letter came. This was, I imagine, one of the less malignant and more low-tech ways that the national security state surveilled and scorned those who had broken faith with the marvelous power of nuclear annihilation. A different thread came through Yuki's mother, Ai Handa, or Connie, a Seattle-born and bred Nisei, whose school friend Taichan had gone back to Japan with her family in the summer of 1941. Connie's parents had bought tickets for her to visit Japan the following summer, during which she hoped to catch up with Taichan. Alas, men of power had different travel plans, involving ships steaming toward Hawaii. And after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Connie's entire family, entire neighborhood, were rounded up and deported to an internment camp in the deserts of Idaho. Tai-chan spent the rest of her high school years in wartime Japan. Both girls came back to Seattle after the war. Both formed families on the East Coast, stayed in touch by mail. Decades later, when Yuki and I were engaged, Connie was invited to an event at Tai-chan's home in Maryland and brought us with her. The two 60-somethings were like teenagers again, remembering old times, when I, being a curious guy, asked about Tai-chan's experiences during the war. Connie's interest was piqued. She had never asked about it. In fact, this was fairly common among Japanese Americans of that generation. Tai-chan told us her family had ended up spending those 3 years with relatives in a small town just outside of Hiroshima. The room fell silent. Her sister, she added, went into the city center each morning for work. And yes, off she went the morning of August 6th to the city center, waving her hand goodbye to her sister, calling out, "Ja mata," till later. But there was no later. The sister never came back. There was the picadon of the atomic explosion, the fireball rising over the city, the fires and smoke, and then dazed and scarred people trudging out of town as the day wore on. Tai-chan told us that she tried to enter the city looking for her sister. She had to turn back. Dante could not have imagined such a hell. The horrors of that awful day will be addressed far more powerfully by Shiho Burke in a few minutes. Let me just say that Tai-chan's account left my mother-in-law uncharacteristically speechless. In many years of correspondence, she had never heard from her friend about her presence at the dawn of the nuclear age. Tai-chan's sister was one of 66,000 civilians killed in the explosion that day, including over 90% of the city's doctors and nurses. Among the dead were thousands of Koreans, unwilling subjects of His Imperial Majesty, brought to labor in the city. 12 American prisoners of war were also killed. Regrettable collateral damage, as they say in the military. The death toll would double in weeks and months to come with the insidious effects of radiation poisoning. A few years ago, Yuki and I went to Nagasaki, the city that is forever twinned with Hiroshima in human memory like Sodom with Gomorrah. UNESCO has conferred World Heritage recognition on Nagasaki for its hidden Christian sites, where Japanese Christians secretly persisted in their faith despite centuries of ferocious persecution by chauvinist shoguns. Ironically, the atomic bomb was dropped just meters from the city's Catholic cathedral that was packed with worshipers, none of whom survived. UNESCO has also designated a World Heritage Site in Hiroshima, a site specific to the ruins of the nuclear attack. UNESCO describes the Genbaku Dome, that famous survivor of the bombing, as, quote, a stark and powerful symbol of the most destructive force ever created by mankind, which, it says, also expresses the hope for world peace and the ultimate elimination of all nuclear weapons. Although the United States, joined only by China, opposed World Heritage designation for the dome in 1996, lamenting its, this is rich, quote, lack of historical perspective, end quote. President Barack Obama, 20 years later, went to the site. Obama, the only sitting U.S. president ever to visit Hiroshima, told his listeners, quote, we have a shared responsibility to look directly in the eye of history and ask what we must do differently to curb such suffering. More commonly, however, men of power have asked not what we must do differently, but how we can build more. Although the very first resolution of the newly created United Nations General Assembly called for, quote, the elimination from national armaments of atomic weapons and of all other major weapons adaptable to mass destruction, hard-nosed men of power have been notably less sentimental in assessing how such weapons can advance what they call national security. Over the past 8 decades, weapons have been built. Testing has been halted. Weapons have spread. Testing has resumed. Weapons have been dismantled. Delivery systems have advanced. Testing has been halted. Warhead limits have been breached. Treaties have been renounced. Public concern has waxed and waned. Shortly, we'll consider where we've been and where we are now, but let us first attend to where it all began.
At this point, we would like to hear again from the Solidarity Singers. Thank you. Thank you. Please welcome them. Come back up, please.
No more new tests. taking a stand for a thermonuclear ban, and we'll work till we're all nuclear free. We need clean energy without radioactivity. We need safe waters, soil and air. We are taking a stand for a thermonuclear ban, and we'll work till we're all nuclear free. Negotiation, not a confrontation. We need diplomacy, not war, not more war. We are taking a stand for a thermonuclear ban, and we'll work till we're all nuclear free. That chorus. Yes, we are taking a stand for a thermonuclear ban, and we'll work till we're all nuclear free. Solo rapper. You don't look much like a rap group. And I'm afraid that we don't have a good beat but it's a piece rap that Diane wrote. Sort of based on the first song that sang. Mostly beautiful, it's kind of hard to sing along. Lay your swords and shields, study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields, study war no more. Drop those guns, dismantle those bombs, instead of hate, spread peace and calm. Shine a light, teach hope, not fear, study war no more.
We sure need some better solutions. Teach peaceful conflict resolution. Let's have more conscious evolution.
Study war no more.
Children and parents born the world round, for all of the lives prematurely cut down. Let all the wailing confirm and resound that we'll
study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields, study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields, study war no more. Drop those guns, dismantle those bombs, instead of hate, spread peace and calm. Shine a light, teach hope, not fear, study war no more.
bypass that local recruiting station. Death should cause you some hesitation, and killing others real consternation.
Study war no more.
On our youth, they prey like vultures. Let's get the violence out of our culture. We can't keep sacrificing our future.
Study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields. Study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields. Study war no more. Drop those guns, dismantle those bombs. Instead of hate, spread peace and calm. Shine a light, teach hope, not fear. Study war no more.
Pollution, starvation, war, and occupation. It's all a dead-end destination. Let's turn away from all this desecration.
Study war no more.
Instead of sowing hate and dissension, escalating conflicts past comprehension, sow seeds of hope and regeneration.
Study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields. Study war no more. Lay down your swords and shields. Study war no more.
Drop those guns and ban those bombs.
instead of hate, spread
peace and calm. Shine a light, teach hope, not fear, study war no more. Study war no more. Power to the
power to the peace. We're going to do a song called If You Want Peace, Work for Justice. That's really all you need to know to sing this chorus. Sing that 3 times. And the last line of the chorus is no justice, no peace.
Page 1 of yours, 50. Same thing.
You want peace, work for justice. You want peace, work for justice. You want peace, work for justice. No justice, no peace. You can't have peace in a world of hunger. One dog over, one dog under. You can't have peace in a world of hunger. Not in this world until the last chain falls. Hunger will make slaves of us all. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. No justice, no peace. You can't have peace in a world of war, where the rich get richer and the poor stay poor. You can't have peace in a world of war. Not in this world until the last chain falls. War will make slaves of us all. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. No justice, no peace. You can't have peace in a world of hatred. Your way's evil, my way's sacred. You can't have peace in a world of hatred. Not in this world until the last chain falls. Hatred will make slaves of us all. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. No justice, no peace. You can't have peace in a world of violence, a world of terror, fear and silence. You can't have peace in a world of violence. Not in this world until the last chain falls. Violence will make slaves of us all. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Once more. No justice, no peace. Thank you very much. We're going to turn the program back over to Tom, I guess. We'll tell you what we're going to do next.
Now, okay. So thank you, Bennet, Zurofsky, and to the Solidarity Singers. And they will be back at the end. But we really do appreciate them filling out this program in a way that talks to our souls. Our next speaker, I think, will also be talking to our souls in a way. She is the speaker. Sorry. The speaker is Shiho Burke, is her name. She's living here in New Jersey. But her background is that her family was in Japan during the time of, the end of World War II. And she has some things to speak about how this impacted her and others, especially she wasn't around then, but her family at the time. And since then, she's had an interesting history, and I think there's a lot to it, but to cut it real short, she was working as an actress at the age of 10 in a movie by a famous Japanese director and producer. And then later on she was in a documentary, and the experience of movie making took her all around the world, and ultimately they did settle here in the United States. She lives in New Jersey, and she's here to speak about some of the experiences of her family and of her own life as she tries to bring it all together in a book that's coming up, maybe, I hope, sometime soon. Okay, so this is Shiho Burke.
I would like to thank the Coalition of Peace Action for giving me this opportunity tonight to speak. My name is Shiho Burke, and my maiden name is Kikuzaki, which means crescent month in Japanese. I'm the only child of two survivors Hiroshima bombing, Toru and Mizuha Kikuzaki. At the time of the bombing, my parents were 10 years old, attending Hiroshima Tenma Elementary School. On August 6, 1945, my mother was where she was supposed to be, unfortunately, just 1.1 kilometers away from the epicenter. My father was about 1.5 kilometers away from the blast, at home with a stomach ache, which likely spared his life. Most of people died in the initial explosion or within months or years from radiation sickness. My mother was initially trapped under the burning remains. A miraculous shade of light led her to climb out and escape from the debris that was once due of her school. She sustained severe injuries to her arm and scalp. After her escape, she began to walk toward the designated bomb shelter where students were assigned to gather in case of an air raid. She was stopped by Japanese soldiers who told her she was walking toward the blast center. She then walked home. Her house was standing, and her mom and dad were there. Her 13 and 15-year-old brothers were at the factory, forced to build plane parts instead of attending the regular schools. One of her brothers was badly hurt. He has since passed, but I remember him from my childhood as a handsome man with extensive scar covering his face. Her older brother, Kunihiro, took his own life after a long struggle with depression due to his father's injuries and the loss of much of his mobility due to his extensive injuries. My mother's beloved father, a governmental official and a prominent businessman, went out of his way to help others. This led to his second exposure to radioactive fallout, Rock Lane. He died a few months later from radiation sickness at the age of 38. Fortunately, my grandparents' two houses on their property withstood the blast. However, my grandmother had glass fragments embedded in her chest from shattered windows, which continued to surface year after year through her skin, and her chest required a reconstructive surgery. Initially, my aunt showed no signs of injuries, but the long-term effects claimed her life at the age of 42. My Uncle Georgie was scrambled to liver cancer in his 40s, 6 months after from his sister's Denise. On the day of the bombing, my mother began exhibiting symptoms of radiation sickness. This marked the beginning of her lifelong struggle with the physical after effects of the bombing. Her condition progressively worsened until at the age of 28. Her doctor pronounced her terminal and gave her 3 months to live. Facing death, my mother's will to survive and ultimate turnaround to the east of medicine definitely saved her life. After 4 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth, my mom gave up the idea of having a baby. Then she got pregnant at the age of 40 and gave birth to me in 1974. Growing up in Hiroshima, my parents' first-hand experience of the atomic bombing profoundly influenced my dedication to advocate for peace. Daily encounter with people whose lives had been shattered by the bombing encouraged me to spread the word of peace. In 1984, Japanese director Yamada Tengo, known for the effort then, and prominent director and screenwriter Shindo Kaneda, whose movie Postcard was an Oscar selection for Best Foreign Film, allowed me to star in their movie White Town, Hiroshima. This film told the story of the girl whose life was drastically altered by the single bomb dropped in Hiroshima. By the time I was 16, I was a member of a Crane Club dedicated to honoring Sadako Sasaki at Hiroshima Jugakuin High School. As a peace ambassador, I had opportunity to travel to Europe with the TV crew to film a documentary. Sadako Sasaki, who passed away at the age of 16 from leukemia caused by the radiation sickness, caused by the leukemia, once said, "Only the painful industrial museum will always speak to the world about the atomic bomb." Her words became the impetus for the preservation of the atomic bomb dome. Then the small movement, like a tiny flame, grew into a widespread effort. And in 1967, the atomic bomb dome began its first preservation work. Inspired by Sadako Sasaki's wish that sparked the preservation of the atomic bomb dome, I embarked on a journey to trace the decisions made regarding the dome and to explore the forgotten life of young Lazo, who was the architect of the atomic dome in Hiroshima. This trip also included visits to Theresienstadt concentration camp, Hitler's hideout, and the architectural school in Vienna that Hitler almost attended, which could have altered his path and prevented him from becoming the dedicator he was. The news of Fukushima meltdown spread like wildfire, raising concerns about leaving my 78-year-old mother in Japan had intensified. The exposure to excessive radiation once wasn't enough for my mother. Now she was facing a fatal second exposure to dangerous level of radiation. On March 27, 2011, 2 weeks after the 3/11 disaster, I boarded the plane to retrieve my mother from ground zero. It was surprising and distressing when the Japanese government not only concealed the truth about the accident's details, but they provided misleading information to their own people. Scientists and experts understood the numbers and facts, but the public was largely kept in the dark. It angered me that the first nation to witness the silent suffering from radiation's after effects on human body, and the first nation to witness the total destruction of human souls and mind resulted by the radioactive contamination, would still resort to using radiation as an energy source due to the shortage. As a parent of 3 children, seeing mothers in Fukushima walking around with the radiation detectors to ensure their children's safety brought tears to my eyes. Health reports have already shown that the number of Fukushima children with thyroid cancer is reaching to hundreds, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Throughout history, mankind has attempted to control and harness nuclear energy, but the failures have resulted in disasters from Fukushima to Chernobyl and Hiroshima to Nagasaki. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are not just events in history books. They are stark reminders of the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. As a nuclear nation and the country heavily relied on nuclear power, we are placing the health and well-beings of our people at significant risk. The dangers are more pressing than ever, and we need to urgently rethink our stance on the disarmament of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear reactors. Knowing the unforeseen accidents and unfortunate tragedies we are likely to face, we can't justify using nuclear energy or nuclear weapons. Given the long-term physical and mental damages we must endure, we have no choice but to seek alternative solutions for our energy and weapon of our choice. There were 215 atmospheric nuclear testings and 815 underground nuclear testings were conducted by U.S. Subcritical nuclear tests are still being conducted right now on this soil, and we do not know if those tests are safe or not. In the current geopolitical climate, with Russia and North Korea threatening to use nuclear weapons and Iran pursuing its own nuclear arsenal, the world faces an unprecedented of nuclear threat. It is imperative that we take collective action to reduce and eventually eliminate these risks to ensure a safer future for all. We can't change the past or take back the mistakes we have already made. But we can indeed change the future, but not repeating these mistakes. Nuclear disarmament, not just in America or Japan, but everywhere on Earth, is a hard goal to reach, but it must be achieved. As Elie Wiesel once said, to forget the Holocaust is to kill twice. To forget any of these events is to kill twice. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experience with the effects of this tragic event. Now it's your job, your children's job, and even your grandchildren's job to preserve these memories. We cannot forget what happened on that fatal summer day, August 6, 1945. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shiho. We would like now to to have a speaker return. Jeff Laurenti, who has been talking about things of the past, will give us a view in another direction. Jeff Laurenti.
Forgive me for getting a little more casual without the jacket, but it's beginning to wear, right? Arigatou gozaimasu, Shiho-san. Thank you very much for having shared with us this experience of humankind's first encounter with nuclear warfare. And this explains why there was such a yearning right after that war to put those bombs away and eliminate them before they spread. Hence that first resolution of the UN General Assembly demanding their elimination from any country's arsenals. Alas, men of power had thought differently. And while they have eventually accepted disarmament regimes for lesser weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, even cluster munitions, they have clung tenaciously to the Golem's ring of nukes. It took concerted public protests and mobilization in the 1950s and 60s, and such what we now call cultural memes as Dr. Strangelove, to force the biggest nuclear armed states to halt nuclear weapons testing in the atmosphere. After President John F. Kennedy secured agreement with the Soviets on the atmospheric test ban, the partial test ban treaty of 1963, he was astonished by the depth of public emotion and enthusiasm when he mentioned this treaty in his speeches around the country, especially given that in Washington, this was a subject of furious debate and opposition from Senate conservatives. Quote, "If I had known how popular this would be," he joked with his aides, "I would have done it a long time ago." End quote. It was a joke. Public anxieties about nukes were still sufficiently intense that a year later, his successor, Lyndon Johnson, would deploy the famous 60-second Daisy TV spot against his challenger for the presidency, a crusty conservative who had vehemently denounced the treaty as a sellout of American national security. That first achievement in reining in a runaway arms race was followed by others. The Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968, with its famous, but to this day unenforceable, commitment by the nuclear armed states to negotiate a rollback of their nuclear arsenals. President Richard Nixon's Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty with the Soviets, an anti-ballistic missile treaty, which helped ignite, by the way, a rebellion from his party's right wing. And Jimmy Carter's SALT II, But the tide was turning then in American politics. And this, as Mark pointed out, is the time when the Coalition for Nuclear Disarmament began to form right here in Princeton, leading the fight for a nuclear freeze as a hawkish administration took power in the 1980s. The citizenry's fears of nuclear cowboys and, if anyone remembers the made-for-TV film The Day After, chastened even an administration that had made its mark with MX missiles, with intermediate range missile deployments, and the Star Wars of SDI, such that it seized the opening provided by a new leader in the Soviet Union, a reminder that it does take convergent changes in major powers' leadership to be able to move the needle in a big way. And it then became, to the surprise of many of us at the time, none other than Ronald Reagan, who declared with Mikhail Gorbachev that, quote, nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. The end of the Cold War led to deep arms reductions. Both Reagan and his successor, George Bush, basked in the glow of warm public approval for putting the nuclear demons to rest. Perhaps they were too successful, for citizens let down their guard while the nuclear arms lobby regrouped. When the Clinton administration negotiated and signed the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, an avowed goal of American policy for 40 years, conservative hardliners in control of the Senate, I'm thinking of you, Jesse Helms, and you, John Kyle, rejected ratification. Then the junior George Bush abrogated Nixon's anti-ballistic missile treaty. When Barack Obama negotiated another round of deep cuts in nuclear arsenals in the New START Treaty of 2010, he could only win the needed Republican senators to ratify it by agreeing to a massive so-called modernization of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, a multi-trillion-dollar program. As an undergraduate at Columbia in 1982, Obama had been mobilized into the campaign for nuclear disarmament, part of the same nuclear freeze movement that was galvanizing us here in Princeton. But as president, he had to square off against a nuclear arms lobby that remains deeply entrenched among men of power in Washington, at a time when much of the public has been lulled into complacency and the grassroots organizations for peace had withered, had been demobilized. Let me assure you, our Coalition for Peace Action has not demobilized. And we must not, for we are at another crossroads today. For the first time in half a century, a big nuclear armed power trapped in a war of its own making has repeatedly threatened to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. Another has embarked on matching America's nuclear modernization with a buildup of its own. The nuclear weapons lobby in our own country has begun agitating for a resumption of weapons testing, ending our de facto respect for the purposes of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. The lobby has powerful friends in Congress and in at least one presidential campaign. Friends, we cannot afford to demobilize. Frustrated by the con job of the men of power in nuclear weapon states, much of the rest of the world gave up on their empty promise in the Non-Proliferation Treaty to negotiate away their arms, nuclear arms, and a decade ago launched a negotiating process for a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. the nuclear powers and their allies boycotted the negotiations, but the resultant treaty has been ratified by 70 states and entered into force 2 days after Joe Biden's inauguration. Though the treaty has been scorned by the weapons lobby as performative UN gum beating, a growing number of members of Congress have rebelled against the Washington consensus to black out any mention of the treaty. 43 members have co-sponsored House Resolution 77, which explicitly endorses the goals and provisions of the treaty. These congressional members have laid out an agenda for us all. A, negotiate a new bilateral disarmament agreement with Russia before the New START treaty, the last treaty we have standing from the era of arms control, in 2026, and pursue then negotiations with China and other nuclear armed states for verifiable and enforceable elimination of nuclear arsenals. B, renounce the option of using nuclear weapons first. No first use declaration. C, end the president's sole authority to launch a nuclear attack, something people really began to worry about in the last administration, remember. D, take U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. And E, halt the $3 trillion program of nuclear modernization. I am pleased to report that 5 members of Congress from New Jersey have signed on to this resolution, the most from any state save enormous California. Moreover, the 3 Congress members representing districts in Mercer, Monmouth, Middlesex within a 20-mile radius of where you are sitting and I am bloviating are all co-sponsors. Andy Kim, Frank Pallone, and Bonnie Watson Coleman. This, I submit to you, is a sign of the effectiveness of our coalition in staying mobilized and in keeping our elected officials informed and accountable. Remembering the destruction wreaked by the use of nuclear weapons 8 decades ago is not just an exercise in idle memory. It is essential to inform our decisions and actions today. So I congratulate you on being here this evening and sharing those reflections from of old and the purpose for our action today. Phasing out our nuclear arsenals is not a liberal versus conservative debate. If you are a fiscally conservative citizen who wants to cut wasteful federal spending, squandering another $300 billion on shiny new Sentinel missiles to deliver nuclear warheads we can't conceivably use, is another special interest boondoggle. A strong national defense is built not only on diplomacy and the arts of peace, but on an arsenal that you can actually use in a crisis, not showcase weaponry whose use would unite the whole world against you. So yes, we have common ground. Let us build on it. Let us use the heightened attention the public gives to issues during a competitive presidential campaign to engage our fellow citizens and to tell our would-be leaders what they must do. let us stay mobilized for life, for peace, and let us never forget. Thank you.
Now the Solidarity Singers will return for 2 or 3 more songs. We would like to pass out some electric candles and make a sort of a vigil, as it were, while we are listening to some of these songs. So they should be coming around in your direction while the singers are singing, and then and so, once again, Bennet Zurofsky and the Solidarity Singers.
We're going to begin.
The English.
She'll sing in the first verse, then we'll all join in, sing an English translation written by you.
Siro ihana saku ayurusu maji genbaku mitabi urusu maji genbaku warera no maji.
The place where our city was destroyed, and we bury the ashes of the ones that we know. Where the green grass grows and the white wavy weeds, every harvest of June at falls. Then brothers and sisters, you must watch and take care that the third atom bomb never comes. Gentle rain gathers poison from the sky, and the fish carry death in the depths of the sea. Fishing boats are idle, their owners are blind. Deadly harvest of 2 atom bombs, then lands and sea, and you must watch and take care that the third atom bomb never comes. The sky hangs like a shroud overhead, and the sun is in
atom bombs. Then people of the world, you must watch and take care that the third atom bomb never comes. Sato no machi yakare, meyo ri no me nesi yakatsuchi ni. Iwa wasiro ihana saku. Ayuru sumaji genbaku wo. Mitabi urosumaji genbaku wo. Ware ranama chi. Again.
like an ostrich, bury their heads in the sand. Some hope that plastic dreams will unpledge all the greedy hands. Some people want to take the easy way. Poisons, bombs, they think we need them. Don't they know you can't kill all the unbelievers? There's no shortcut to freedom. There's just one blue sky above us. One blue sky above us. One ocean lapping all our shores. One earth so green and round. One earth so green and round. Who can ask for more? And because I love you. And because I love you. I'll give it one more try. I'll give it one more try. To show my rainbow rays. To show my rainbow rays. It's too soon to die. It's too soon to die. Go tell all the little children. Tell all their mothers and fathers too. Now's our last chance to learn to share what's been given to me and you. One blue sky above us. One blue sky above us. One ocean rocking all our shores. Waters so clean and round. Who could ask for more? And because I love you. And because I love you. I'll give it one more try. I'll give it one more try. Show my rainbow rays. To show my rainbow rays. It's too soon to die. And because we love you. And because we love you. We'll give it one more try. We'll give it one more try. To show our rainbow rays. To show our rainbow rays. It's too soon to die. It's too soon to die. Let's show our rainbow rays. Let's show our rainbow rays. It's too soon to die. Thanks very much to the Solidarity Singers of the New Jersey State Industrial Union Council. It's been an honor for us to speak with you tonight. Safe travels. Let's all work.
Shalom, shalom.
Like before you get this over, keep turning it over.
So yes, I would like to thank again the Solidarity Singers who have come year after year to make this a special occasion, along with one that we are remembering for more solemn reasons. But the music makes the program much what it needs to be. So thank you, Bennet, and thank you to the whole group. I would also like to thank some of the people helping, including Priscilla Koshia. Thank you very much for helping. And our assistant director, Jennifer New, also working the camera over here. Jennifer especially, was the one who really put this evening together. I want to thank her in a special way. Thank you so much for all the work you put into it. And I would like to thank everybody who is here and who came to spend the evening with us and contemplating the commemoration that we're observing tonight. And thank you for coming. And go. Oh, Shiho. Oh, yes. That was on my list. To our speakers. One, of course, is Jeffrey Laurenti. Thank you for coming, Jeffrey. And also Shiho. There you are. Okay. Thank you so much for the message that you brought to us tonight. And thank you everybody who came tonight, and go home in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, yes, passing your candles on your way.